Hello. My name is Joel Engelbert. This is Flipping Out with Friends, episode 3, if we want to give it an episode number, where I get to interview somebody in the pinball industry, and I'm super excited. Today we're interviewing Brian Eddy, the one, the only, and it's perfect timing because as of yesterday, Stranger Things was just re-released, or they just did a vault version of it. So Brian, you currently have like 2 games back to back on the line right now, Venom and now Stranger Things. So this is a perfect time to interview you. So thank you so much for being on here for this.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're just going to go with this and see where this conversation goes. So my first thought with Stranger Things was, this is a vault. And I know typically with a vault, you have a chance to like readdress some things or look at some things. Are there any particular changes or fixes that you've made to the vault version of Stranger Things that was not in the original?
Yes, there are some changes, some updates to try to make it a little more predictable. The ball lock in the back being the main thing. I know a lot of people had trouble adjusting that to get it to work just right.
Mm-hmm.
So they've redesigned that area a little bit to help make that a little easier. Um, so hopefully that works on a large majority of machines without much tweaking.
Sweet. Because yeah, I know I I had a Pro that I borrowed and streamed the heck out of, and I loved it. I absolutely had a blast with it, and that was a Pro that didn't have the UV kit. It was just a bare bones Pro, and I had a blast. And then I remember when I went to return it to get a new game to stream for Zach, I played as LE, and actually experiencing Stranger Things with the projector, the UV light kit, the TK lock that was working. I mean, what an incredible experience. So it does bum me out when I go on location and see a premium that has the TK lock turned off. So I'm hoping that this is an opportunity for people to get games that TK lock's more reliable, because it's really cool mech.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it should be more reliable in the new version. They've also made some tweaks, I think, to the Demogorgon to try to make him a little more reliable to be
Oh,
able to get it
nice.
in the mouth. Um, so other than that, I think those are the two major areas that I think the rest of it worked pretty well as is.
Hmm.
So there are some small updates like that along the way.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited that more people have a chance to get the game, because that game, especially over COVID, was like super hot and people were trying to track it down, and the premium was almost the limited edition. It just seems like there weren't a ton out there. Anybody that had them, they weren't selling them. So now the fact that people can get those, what an amazing immersive experience that game provides. And maybe that leads to my next question. I do want to talk about your beginning of pinball, but I will say, between Medieval Madness and Stranger Things, you had like 22 years, I think is the math, of no pinball. So were there things during that time period that in your head you were like, if I ever get, first, were you ever thinking about getting back into pinball? And if so, were there things that you saw and you thought like, this would be cool to add to a pinball machine? Because to come right out of the gates with Stranger Thing and have projection mapping and that UV printed ink, like those are crazy. Those are completely unique things. Were those like stewing in your brain for years and years and years?
Yeah, after leaving pinball, I think it was like 98 was when Medieval came out.
Hmm.
So I've never stopped thinking about pinball. I always loved pinballs. They're one of the funnest things to create and design because you get to play with everything. There's the whole play field, the physical layout, right? There's software, there's the artwork from the artist, and then now there's all the video art, where it used to be dot back in the 90s. So they're just immensely fun creations to make, to pull people into this little world and entertain them. There's nothing like it. So I absolutely loved it, and I've never stopped thinking about it.
So like projection mapping though, was that something that you knew, whatever my first game is back at Stern, I want to try this? Or did it just happen to work out where like Stranger Things was such a unique theme that it worked for that? I mean, I know, like, for example, like I know Keith Elwin. He said in Avengers, the in Godzilla, the Magna Grab. Apparently, he was originally trying to get that in Avengers, and it wasn't working. So he knew that was a mech that he wanted to bring into his next game. So that's what I'm trying to think. You have 22 years of time off from pinball. Were you like, here's my like, I'm ready. These are what I'm bringing to the table. Or it just happened that, Stranger Things. Let's figure this out.
I was thinking about it for 20 years straight, Joe. 20 years. No, actually, not at all. But I did take tons of notes. I was always thinking little devices, and I'd jot down things
Hmm.
and throw it in the files, hoping one day, I'd go back to pinball. But the projection mapping stuff, I think, really came from a convergence of the technology and the size of projectors
Hmm.
being in the price point of it all coming together at some point in time that made it possible. Like
Hmm.
10 years ago, you couldn't have done that, right?
Yeah,
Even 5 years ago, when Stranger Things was made, you couldn't have done it. So it was that convergence of making a projector small enough, making it the cost effective enough for the pinball machine and bright enough, right? All those little technical hurdles, it just was the right moment in time to give it a try.
yeah,
And it definitely was unique in pinball. I wanted something that was unique when I came out, like you said, after 20 some years
for
with the
sure.
game, and hopefully achieve that.
Oh, it's I've genuinely I can own 4 games. I have room for 4 games. So for a game to fit in my collection, it's really it's got to meet a lot of criteria, or it's got to beat out a lot of other really good games. But there's something about a Stranger Things Premium that is so unique. I mean, it is unlike any other pinball machine out there. Between I mean, the projection mapping alone is such a unique and dynamic feature, and that's something that this would be a great segue into Venom, but I don't want to go like dynamic. The
Not yet.
fact that yeah, the fact that pinball, my the complaint with a pinball machine is it if it's the same thing every single time you play it, it can get a little old, and so
Yeah.
you want to have. And that's where I think lighting or the expression lighting or different things that make the physical aspect of the machine feel different as the game changes, game state changes, I think are huge, and that's something Venom is doing incredibly well. But that's the way that I felt about Stranger Things, even just different modes and what the visual and the projections doing just changes the game's feeling all throughout it, and that's incredible.
Yeah, that immersion is really important to me, is to make you feel like you're part of it, and to take you different places as you're playing it.
Hmm.
And like going in the upside down, right, with the UV kit, I think that gives it a feel of I really am somewhere different, doing something different.
Yeah.
And the combination of in the UV ink and stuff to tie into all that, we did a lot of testing to make sure that would work on all the different printing methods and stuff. So I think in the end, it is pretty shocking. Most people, the first time they see it, are like, oh,
Yeah.
wow, right? What
Yeah.
is that? And so,
So let me ask about that. How in the world were those games made and out on location and nobody caught the UV ink? Like nobody caught it until I feel like it was like a few weeks later that you announced the UV light kits, and people were what? What are you talking about? And it's,
right,
the
right,
fact that these are games that people have been playing and looking at and nobody noted, like nobody knew that. I mean, was
right.
that something from an internal standpoint that you guys were just kind of chuckling in the background? Like, is somebody going to figure this out, or
Yeah, a
how was
little
that
bit.
taken?
That
Yeah.
that was kind of George's idea to like not announce it right away, so that would be a bit of a surprise a little
Yeah.
bit later that would come out, and I think it did really
Hmm.
surprise people. I think it's just unexpected, right? People just wouldn't think there would be something else there, so nobody even thought to put a UV light on it.
Yeah.
So it's not too surprising that it wasn't caught.
Yeah.
But it did definitely make a splash. I think there was a little controversy at first with the pricing and that it was an add-on and such, but I think it really does add to the game.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, I'll tell this to anybody listening, if you happen to get a Stranger Things, whether it's an original version or one of the remakes, like you got to get the UV light kit. You have to get, like, it's such a unique experience when that goes off in the game, and it's yeah, it makes the game feel completely different. So I think it's awesome. I mean, those are two things. The UV light kit and the projection mapping are just so unique to that game that really just make it stand out from all other games.
Yeah, the projector is kind of interesting because every time there's something that radically different introduced into pinball, it usually takes a couple games too to where you can really utilize it to even more advanced
Hmm.
ways. And I think if we did more games with it down the line or something, we would definitely see more and different things that you could do with it.
Oh, for sure.
We did a lot of experimenting early on with things that we could do, and the fact that, well, wait, it looks like it can light the whole playfield with a pattern, and then we can put all these little billboards everywhere, and it all can be animated and moving. And we were continuously finding new ways to use it. And I think if you started fresh, knowing all that, you would probably design even cooler things with it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So let's take a step back. Let's take a step back to some of your lesser known games, being Medieval Madness and Attack from Mars. No. So two games.
Nobody's heard of those games.
Two games.
You talk about something somebody's heard about?
Yes. Those two games, I do. I understand why, but those games have been, rated in the Pinside top 5 forever.
Right.
What's crazy to me, I actually looked this up because I have not owned either of those. I've played the heck out of them on location. One game I have owned of yours, though, is Shadow.
Mm-hmm.
I did not realize Shadow was your first game.
Right.
Shadow, yeah. And yes, because you were involved in some of the software with previous games, but your first actual design is probably the craziest or the most unique when it comes to ball path and stuff compared to the rest of your collection. So Shadow, you've been given the game. I mean, that is, when I think of Brian Eddy design, it's not the Shadow layout. I mean, that's a crazy layout. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Or when you were given Shadow, I mean, how did you end up there or getting that type of direction?
Yeah, after I finished programming the previous game, I really wanted to go into design. I had all these ideas, right, and things I wanted to put on a play field. And Ken Fedesnik, who was in charge of engineering at the time, he's the one who gave me the chance. Well, sure, go ahead, see what you can do, right? And so I started drawing. This was on paper. We didn't have AutoCAD or computers to draw anything at the time, so I had started on paper. I ended up on computer by the end of it, but it started out on paper. And I had all these ideas, tons of things. Being your first game, sometimes you have too many ideas, and it's trying to weed those down into something that can fit on a game and cost effective and all that. So there were 3 things on even Shadow that we couldn't afford to put on. That were part of the design, almost all the way up to the end. Either design time or cost or various reasons, right, that they were pulled off. But I look back on Shadow fondly. I mean, the movie didn't end up doing well. It's funny because I had listened to the radio shows before, so I knew what Shadow and Shadow from the 30s was. So I thought, well, they're pushing it like Batman. It could be the next big thing. But back then we would do a lot of games before the movie came out, right? So it would land hopefully making the game in production when the movie came out and get some of that promotion. We don't do that so much anymore, but that was a huge risk because so many of the movies that we did that with just weren't that great.
Yeah.
And Shadow was kind of that. It wasn't an absolutely horrible movie, but it wasn't a very good movie either. So it was a little disheartening on that side, but I think we captured the core of what that is, what Shadow is, and what the movie is, and the snippets, the sound bites, the mechanisms of the game. I think still follow pretty true to that theme.
Yeah.
To me, I look back at the game, and you're right. There's a lot of stuff on it. Sometimes I look back at past projects and look at them and say, "How the hell did we do all that in that time?" Right?
Yeah.
That was that game. It was a new mechanical engineer at the time too. I did the programming and the design on it.
Oh wow!
So I did both, and so it was a pretty hectic project. But in the end, I think you look back and it's like, well, there's some cool things. There's unique things that we hadn't seen in the game before, and it seems to have this following, this cult following now too. Shadow.
I really enjoyed having it, and this was early when I got into pinball, so it was kind of I could only really own one game at a time. So at that time I owned 2, and I owned World Cup Soccer and I owned Shadow. And I remember thinking to myself, World Cup Soccer will be a game that my friends and family will really dive into because it's very easy to understand. But then Shadow will be my game because I know it's more challenging. I know it's a theme people don't really resonate with. I was wrong. People loved playing that game. They didn't know that they don't care. One, the kids love the gun shooter knob. So instead of a shooter knob. So first, maybe that's a question. Is there any chance that will ever return, do you think, to modern pinball instead of having an actual plunger, some sort of gun or something like that? Because I think they're awesome. I
think they're fun too. I mean, I'd never say never, right? Because who knows?
Sure.
Then stranger things have happened. Stranger Things.
Yeah, fun.
I know, like Gary, he really likes that as the nostalgic point of pinball. Right?
It makes sense.
You have a plunger and you pull back. It is a core of pinball, but we're definitely trying to push the bounds here and there.
Yeah,
what's considered exactly a pinball. So I think maybe in the future we can see
that's fair. They're awesome until you run into them when you walk by.
Especially that one.
Sucks. Yes, that thing
solid.
It is. But when I think of Shadow, and what my friends and family loved was just getting up to the battlefield And they just, because it was one of those things that that's the only goal they had, is like, I want to get up there. And then the fact that the way you programmed it was you're hitting certain targets and it's counting down. And so they're trying to see how, how low they can go. That's an awesome upper play field. But the thing to me as a pinball player, the thing that I absolutely adore in Shadow is the ramp diverters. I mean,
Right.
I understand people talk about the people talk about coil count now, and it's each one of those diverters had 2 coils.
Yep.
So there's 4 coils right there in that
Yep.
game. But the snappiness of those ramp diverters is incredible. And I know, Rush has a ramp diverter in it. I know Turtles had it, but it's nothing like the ramp diverters in Shadow. I mean, is that what are your thoughts on that? Is that something that you think you could ever bring back in a game?
Yeah, certainly it could be brought back. To me, I like it. I really wanted to do that because it gave players control.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I can determine at each shot where that flipper comes back, same flipper, the opposite flipper. So that allowed them to kind of plan out their shots too a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And just something like Vengeance. It was just completing the 4 shots, right? But it felt great when you did it. You didn't do it all the time, not every game, but if you're having a decent game, you would do it and it would feel good.
Yeah.
So I like it because of that reason. It gives the player choices.
I completely agree. And I think that came back to something we had mentioned earlier, of just anything that you can do in pinball to change the state of the game and make it feel a little different. If I hit the ramp, and diverters are a huge answer to that. So I love that. I loved that about Shadow. And after Shadow, you then made Attack from Mars and Medieval Madness. And the reason I want to bring those up is they're similar in some ways, very different in others. But I think that is where you crack the code, apparently, of there's something about that layout where when you have a very entertaining mech in an easy to hit area and a nice fan layout, and yet this understanding of you hit shots 3 times, it does this. I mean, we have a bar downtown and I've taken multiple people to it, and there's 20 plus games there. And the game that people always remember is Medieval Madness. And it was number 1 on Pinside a long time. As you, the designer, what is it that you think? What is it about Medieval Madness that you feel just so many people latch onto?
I just think it's a great combination of everything. It's got great art from the art side. It's great music and sound, right? And the playfield layout's accessible, but it has some tighter shots too to add variety in there.
Mm-hmm.
And just the theme and the humor of it, right? It was all those pieces coming together just right that I think made it, as fun as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't always happen, right? It's partly it's the team, it's all the people working on it and how they came together and how they worked on it. And that one, it just really flowed. I mean, it's got like Tina Fey in it, right? It's just a little thing on top of it, right? Before she was anybody, and that was really fun. So it was a lot of people's input to make it what it was. And,
sure.
We were all very passionate about it. It was a theme that hadn't been done in that way before, but yet familiar.
Mm-hmm.
The whole castles and destroying them, and rulers,
and the trolls.
And such. And the trolls, right? Yeah. It's all those classic themes that people kind of relate to, even though it's not a movie or something that somebody knows. They kind of know it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Growing up in history.
When I think of a game that for it to be added to my collection, I feel like it's almost like the elevator pitch. I need if one of my friends steps up to the game, I need that short and simple task to give them to do that's going to hook them, right? And that's what I think the Medieval Madness castle does so well, where if somebody walks up that, they're like, what do I do? It's like, just hit the castle. And it's just the fact that the drawbridge comes down, then the gate goes up, and then they blow it up. I mean, that's all you have to tell the player to do. And that's, going back to Shadow, it's like, hey, hit this drop target dead center, and you're going to pop up there to the battlefield and try to keep the ball alive, short and sweet. And that's something that I see in your games that you do exceptionally well, where it's, what is something that can hook somebody? The short and sweet little thing. Same thing with Stranger Things. It's like, hit the guy in the mouth, that's, you don't even have to explain it. So is that a design philosophy of yours? Like how do you think through that when thinking of a new game?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of casual players out there, And especially when you're introducing new people to pinball, it's exactly what you said. You want to be
Hmm.
able to give them a goal that they can achieve, and that something cool happens, whether it's the spaceship getting blown up and tagged from Mars, or like you said, in medieval, which is a step further, there's a mechanical progression that you
Yeah.
take. And you can see physically that I'm getting closer and closer, and then I blow up a castle. So that simplicity, I think, is really important in pinball. I think over the years, and lately, as pinball's had this bigger resurgence, is that games have gotten more complicated. They've gotten deeper, and to some degree, we've lost a little of that. But we
Hmm.
also have a more sophisticated player base who's with social media talk to everybody else, right? And so the information spreads way differently than it did in the '90s. So you can have that too, but I still like that simplicity of make this shot 3 times. Or, here's this big thing you have to hit. Because everybody can understand it and they can
Hmm.
jump up and have fun. Now I think we need to add more depth and more strategy to the games, which I love too. But to have that initial key to suck people in, like you said, give them something they can do and they can achieve it, they feel great. Then they
Yeah.
want to do it again, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I feel. So that's kind of my philosophy on designing, is trying to make sure that anybody who walks up can do something and have fun, because then if they keep coming back, they'll start learning. They'll start learning,
Hmm.
oh, wait, if I do this and I do these 3 in a row, and then if I do this, right, they'll start learning some of the rules. And then that kind of pulls them in farther and farther. And hopefully gets them hooked and they have a great time.
No, absolutely. And that's something that I think is funny where, like, if my sister-in-law played Medieval Madness, if I'd ask her, like, oh, how'd the game go? Her response was always like, I beat 1 castle. Or like, oh,
Right.
last game I got through 2 castles. No
Yeah.
idea about her score, no
Right.
idea about any other multi-ball mode. Doesn't matter. Like and that's the game that, I've asked people that have played all the different games in my collection and whatnot. It's like, hey, what's the one game that you've had the most fun on? Or people will be like, when are you going to get a Medieval Madness? Like that's that's the game they want in the collection. And yeah, there's something about that of just even Stranger Things, when I had that and explaining that game to friends and family and they see the progression on the inserts, it's like you hit the same shot 3 times, you're going to start a mode. It's that simple.
Right.
Um,
And
maybe that's
Stranger
it.
Things, I know, does really well on location out on routes.
Yeah.
And I think that is part of it, right? Because you get a lot of casual players versus having a game in your home,
Hmm.
or having that depth and strategy so you can have an interesting game for a long time that you want to keep it. But out on the street, it's all casual players that just walk by and play. Obviously, you get hardcore players out there too, but there's just a lot more casual players.
Yeah.
And if you can give them something that they can have fun with, even if they're not a hardcore pinball person, they'll come back and they'll
Hmm.
try it again. And it's exactly what you said. I see the same thing. People will say, how many saucers or how many castles they
Yeah.
destroyed.
Yeah, Attack from Mars, you can get to that point where, the Martians start jumping up and down and people, how did that happen? How do I
Right?
see that again? Destroying the humor. That's another kind
Yeah.
of criteria that I really like about certain pinball games is if it's, bringing me joy, if it's making me laugh, brightening my mood kind of thing. I really latch onto that. So Attack from Mars does that incredibly well. Medieval Madness does that incredibly well. But, fast forward to Stranger Things, I know when I was streaming that, there were moments in that game that were some of the most, I don't know, satisfying or gratifying moments that I've had in pinball. And I know one thing I really like about the code of Stranger Things is, what is it? 3 modes. You get through 3 modes, and you get, is it an extra ball? I think it's 3 modes is an extra ball, and then the 4th mode is the first total isolation.
Right.
And then it's like it's almost like I could take it off in bite sizes, or bite size, where it's like, okay, I got through 3 modes, I only have one more mode to go, and then boom, I'm in total isolation. And that game gets so eerie and really honed in on that. And then you get through that, and it's like, okay, I only have 2 more modes because that'll be 6, and then I'm at another extra ball. And then you work a little harder, and then you get to your 8, and you get to the second one. And I know the first time I got 11 out of the 12 modes done, so I
Oh,
got to
wow.
one of the first mini wizard modes. And what an elated feeling I had, hitting that point. And it's just this journey of, I don't know, like feeling like I could work my way through, but it wasn't this overall daunting task. It was like, just one little bit at a time. We're going to get through this. And yeah, that vibe of like happy-go-lucky kid games, the arcade mode, and then all of a sudden like total isolation, very just
Right.
doom and like,
Totally
okay.
different feel, different
Yeah.
place that you're in. Yeah, and I think obviously total isolation, total annihilation That's not a coincidence,
Yep.
but I think that works, and it's extended obviously in Strangely. It's a much deeper game than Attack from Mars.
Hmm.
So you have that little goal, like you said. To me, getting to the first one's awesome. So I want to get to the second one.
Hmm.
And if you make it eventually to the second one, you're really close to getting to the final wizard.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
usually the last thing that people complete to get there.
so let's move on then to your next game, which was Mando. And Mando, what an amazing time that came out, because it was, I mean, Mandalorian was just coming out. I mean, that was, you had mentioned earlier that you had certain games where you were building the game before the movie was out. This wasn't that exact situation. It was you're building the game as the show is happening. So you as a designer, I'm assuming you're just adapting on the fly, would be my guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was a really fun project because, like you said, Mandalorian is probably one of the top shows, if not the top show at the time it came out.
Hmm.
A lot of excitement over it. It was an awesome series. I think they did a great job on it. But when we started, they had just about finished season one.
Okay.
So we didn't know what was going on for season two, and they wouldn't tell us either. Right? Even though they were filming it and
Yeah.
they're doing it, they kept it really tight. But they give us little tidbits here and there. Like sometimes we get a couple pieces of concept art, but we didn't know what it was going to be until it actually aired.
Hmm.
And then as each episode aired, we got access to the assets and such. But that was soon, right soon after we went into production, not long after that. So it was right up to the end. So even in the artwork on like the back glasses, we saved spots for certain characters that we didn't know who or what they would be, but
Yeah.
talking with
Yeah.
Disney said you might want to save a couple spots over there. So we
Nice.
just kind of left, did a composition and left an area open, expecting that there'd be some characters that we'd really want to add there.
Nice.
Um, but it was a bit of a challenge, but we kind of did that with everything. We did that with software, knowing that okay, we're going to save 3 of these modes or something because we know there's going to be cool stuff coming in season two. But we didn't know that until they aired. We didn't know
Hmm.
what any of it was, so we had to go back and pick apart all those episodes. Not long before we launched the game.
Yeah.
So it
And,
was,
and I know, I mean, like Luke is down on the slings. Like that didn't, I mean, that's what the final episode, I think, of season two. So
yeah.
obviously, yeah. Um, but when you were given Mando, or I don't know exactly how it works this turn. I don't know if you're given Mando or you chose Mando, but either way, this is your first team up with Dwight. And I'm a huge Dwight fan. I love Dwight's energy.
I'm
Um,
sorry to hear that, Joel. Okay.
yeah,
Dwight's awesome.
Dwight is awesome, and
Yeah.
I had him on our first Venom stream. He actually was on audio and video, and just you could sharing that excitement of him walking through the game and the whole XP system and everything. But this is your first team up with Dwight, and he's brought in the Beskar system and buying and upgrading your character and all that, which is really unique. But when you sit down with Dwight and you're like, okay, Mando, previously you had boom, saucer, dead center, you destroy the saucer, boom, castle, you destroy castle, Demogorgon, obviously. Like what there was no obvious thing like that for Mando. I mean, what were some of your first thoughts, or you know, how did you hit the ground running with the layout or the design of Mando?
Yeah, I think I didn't want to do Stranger Things again. Didn't want to do
Hmm.
the big thing in the center, right? Because there's
Hmm.
been a number of games like that. Stranger Things was kind of an homage back to, medieval, and Attack from Mars had been 20 some years.
Sure.
So some of those things I think people wanted to relive in a different form. But I wanted to do something a little bit different, not like that same formula that we did in the past, but still give people something unique and cool like the moving mini playfield and such
Hmm.
to play with. And talking with Dwight at the beginning of that project, right? He likes the depth and the strategy, and I love that too. But I also realized, right, as we had just talked, that there's a lot of casual players out there, and they need stuff too. So that's
Yeah.
something we talk about a lot. Dwight realizes that too, but he really loves the strategy, deep
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
geeky stuff too, which is awesome because it gives a whole nother layer to games, especially when you have a game in your home and you
Hmm.
can play the game for 6 months and still be learning new things about it. And I think that's awesome. It's that balance that you have to find of how do you keep it interesting for the long-term player buys ones at home, and how do you keep it interesting to the casual player who just walks by and you want to catch them and get them interested and want them to keep playing. And that's one of the biggest things I think that's changed about pinball since back in the 90s is that audience is super wide. Not only do
Hmm.
we have like a huge amount of skill difference between players, right? We have people who just play once in a while in an arcade that need to be entertained, and people who want to be entertained for 6 months or a year with unique stuff at home. Plus, we have three different models right along the way. So it's a much bigger world than it was before, which I find interesting, right? It keeps the job more exciting too, is that we have to find that balance on how can we please everybody, which
Yeah.
you
Oh
never
yeah.
can completely, but
No.
that's what we try for. We try to give something for everybody. So Dwight and I will have tons of talks back and forth about that, making sure that let's keep this exciting. There has to be cool stuff for somebody who just walks up to play. Right? There has to be cool stuff that's long term and has some strategy to it if people want to dig into that side. So just a lot of variety that hopefully all kind of comes together into something that works for most people.
Yeah, I don't envy that at all. I think trying to find that balance is near impossible, where it's just you have a certain game that certain really novice people are drawn to, and it's normally because of ease, or they can, like do whatever, like they can destroy a castle super easily. But then you have those, tournament or high end players where they're like, okay, after you destroy the castle for the sixth time in the same game, like
Right.
I want, I want more than
I
that.
need
But
more. Yeah.
yeah, and that I like I said, I don't envy that, trying to find that balance, which is probably near impossible. But I do think you're doing a good job with it. So don't like, you and Dwight, especially Venom is its own animal.
Yes.
But with Mando, so maybe this is a question. When I think of you and I think of like mechs, you typically have a very unique mech. When you're designing, do you think of the mech first and then you're designing shots around it, or are you designing shot paths with just open areas of like, I want the game to shoot this way, but then I'll figure out what goes in that spot later? Like, how do you think that through?
It's a little of both, but and every designer does it differently on how they think about a game. I do tend to start with the mechs
Okay.
more often than not because they're a uniqueness to the game, right? I
Hmm.
always want people to come up to it and see something different or play something different that they haven't seen before in a different way, that we use it in a different way. And so it's important to me that whatever those are, that they stand out in some way,
Sure.
used in an interesting way on the playfield. So I'll usually start there. I'm also a big flow guy though, so I
Hmm.
love flow, and Venom I think is extremely
Yeah.
flowing.
Yeah.
So I like shot patterns, and I try to put shot patterns like that, continuous patterns in all my games. So it's kind of a balance between the two. And you don't want to do the same thing over and over. You just don't
Yep.
want to have the same single bash toy in the center. So I think as you go on, I'm trying to stretch that into different directions.
No, I totally understand. And I think when you had talked about the code or Dwight code with Mando, one thing I really appreciated every time I had a pro that I was borrowing to stream, and one thing I loved was, first off, your use of inserts. Your use of inserts really communicate incredibly well. I know there's an LCD screen on the game, but the more that I play pinball, the more I actually appreciate inserts communicating where I'm at, what the progress is. I knew in Stranger Things you had the six things you had to accomplish, and there's just something about seeing those fill up, seeing your modes fill up, and then Mando's the same thing. Kind of seeing the circle with three different things and working your way through. It's that clicked with me. I loved it, but I really like that it's like, okay, what do I want to focus on? Do I want to focus on encounters? Do I want to focus on the multi balls? Or I'm trying to think of what the last one was, but it's um, the when you got up in the playfield. So it's like modes and then get up in the playfield area
Yep.
or the multi. And I just love being able to. That's a very Dwight thing. Which path do you want to take through this game? Because you're
Yeah.
going to have to do it all eventually. Yeah.
Right, right. And I think me and Dwight working together, because I was on the software side for 8 years or so too, doing the same thing. So it's really easy for us to talk through these things and
Hmm.
understand, what's important and what's accessible, what's a little deeper, what's the deep strategy that people can use. Like the Foundry, like when you first
Yeah.
start playing the game, you don't have any idea about Foundry and you don't know what it does. But if you play the game for a while, you realize, how advantageous it can be,
Hmm.
and how it can just stretch the game in another direction. And so I really like layers like that, so that you can just jump in, make some fun shots, have a good time. Like I was saying before, then you start learning little things about it, different ways of scoring, different ways of playing, or like you
Yeah.
said, well, encounters are harder for me, so I'm going to do the other two easy ones first, or I'm going to try to get encounters done first because I know that's my gating factor. If I can get through them
Hmm.
and get to the other two and get to the wizard mode. But choices from a player standpoint, I think, and how you play really adds life and longevity to a game too, because you'll try different strategies to get there.
Oh yeah. I totally agree. That to me, a pinball machine gets very old very fast when there's one definitive correct way to play it. It's like, well, if you really want to beat the game, you kind of have to go this route. And I don't love that. I really like how a lot of the newer games even have challenge modes or modes that you can, instead of playing the normal game, you can, hey, I only have 10 minutes. I'm going to do this challenge mode instead, or I'm going to do impossible play because I know, I know it's not gonna, I'm not gonna play as long. So I love that variety. And maybe we can finally use that as a segue into Venom. The variety that you have built into Venom is unlike any other game I've played, and it's clear that was your goal. But
Yes.
maybe let's go back to that. I know Dwight is a huge Venom fan. He said he's owned all the comics, like he's all in on Venom. So you guys pick Venom. You guys sit down at the table with your notepads. What were some of the first things you wrote down when it came to the physical design of Venom?
Well, I think the biggest thing, Dwight said that he wanted different hosts, which completely makes sense with Venom, right? He had done
Yep.
something similar in Turtles, but it really made sense in Venom because Venom has been in practically every superhero in the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
At one point or another, there's a storyline with him as part of pretty much every character in the universe. So it completely made sense that you'd be able to choose your host. And I think that kind of set the stage for me thinking too, well, let's just keep going with that. Let's take it farther. Let's make the playfield change too, depending on which host.
Hmm.
And then let's make there be certain advantages to choosing one host over another, different play styles, and let the player choose them what they like and let them form a strategy. And I think that worked out really well, and it really does. When you play the game, you want to play the other characters and you want to try it and you want to see how it feels. And people do some of what we've seen so far seem to settle in on one that they like over the other.
Hmm.
But as we've noticed, if we've played it obviously a long time, that preferences will change over time too, depending on what you want to accomplish in the game or if you're competing against somebody. Like I'll always go for Eddie Brock if I'm competing against somebody because I know I can get a multi-ball
Yeah.
easy
Yeah.
and I can go and get some good points up front. But we see people forming those different strategies, which characters they do, which ones they do first over second, third, fourth.
Yeah, there's so Zach with Flipping Out, he's been letting me borrow a Pro, and as of yesterday, he actually swapped out the Pro for a Premium.
Uh,
So I have actually put a significant amount of time on the Pro. I've already beat Noel 3 times, so
oh wow,
I have all my characters unlocked. But that's not because I'm this exceptional player. I'm far from that. It's just I put in the
yes,
time. I put in the time, and the
yes.
XP system allowed me to work my way up to do that, to actually beat them. And I know Dwight's made some changes recently to Grindel and Noel to make them harder. So there is a chance that I might reset my stuff at some point and try again. But either way, I've put a lot of time on the Pro. And the Pro doesn't have the physical game changing states that the Premium and LE does. I do see
Right.
there is a diverter in the back, so it can change the orbit depending on what the orbit shot does. That's in the Pro. But besides that, there is no physical game change state. So the Pro, I think, really makes what Dwight did shine because it still felt different
Yeah.
when I picked different hosts, but that was all software. It was all software differences.
Still
And it,
different shots to make, and
yep.
so yeah, and there's still strategy between them too. Yeah,
For sure. And I found, like Gwen, like her combo shots were easier for me to hit than other shots. So it's like, okay, I'm starting with her, or, you find your path to kind of work through, or, okay, I'm about to do this. I want to change to this character. And I love that. I love that strategy change. But now, I mean, I've only had this Premium 24 hours. Now that this has the physical game states in it, it feels like a totally different animal. I mean, it's incredible. It really
yeah.
is incredible because of how different the game genuinely feels depending on who you are. And a shot that was an orbit on one character is now diverting into a Vuck and is coming back. So one shot that used to be, a quick horseshoe is now a lock shot. One shot that used to be a ramp that would quickly feed over to the left flipper now stops the ball. and is kind of dangerous as it drops back down, and it's yeah. So where'd you start on that? I'm assuming you had to have started with the mech in the middle, the ramp that moves around.
Right, right. The original concept of that was similar, but not quite the same. It was a big wheel
Oh, okay.
that filled that whole base of the horseshoe, and it would rotate into different shots. So that's kind of where it started. The same concept, right? Depending on what character you chose, it would change the shot patterns based.
Are you saying like vertically, like or Ferris wheel, or it's a horizontal rotation?
It's horizontal, kind of like a Ferris wheel horizontal that
Okay.
rotated on the playfield facing you, the wheel spokes facing you. But it proved a little too difficult to make that happen because of leveling everything to the playfield and such. But it was a big piece, right, that really stood out, which is what I wanted. So I still wanted some grandiose movement so that when the player is selecting, right, they can see something change. Right? And I think we achieved that with the big 180-degree scoop, as we call it, that rotates, and something that's more reliable and solid and easier to build.
Mm-hmm.
But that was there right from the beginning, and probably the first thing is wanting to change the shot patterns. And that's probably one of the first things Dwight and I talked about from a playfield standpoint. We talked a lot about obviously Venom and his history and his background, and
sure,
different hosts and stuff, and then also what characters, right, we could get from Marvel to use, which we were fortunate that we got a huge number of characters,
mm-hmm.
21 or something characters in this game. That really kept it interesting to us.
Yeah.
So many allies and so many enemies that you're going up against, and balanced all that out. And I think the balance is there really well between all of that to keep the game interesting for a long time.
For sure. And that's something that I've been honest with Dwight, because we've been kind of talking behind the scenes, and I've been very serious. I've played Venom more in the last 2 weeks than any other game that Zach's dropped off to let me play. And part of it was because, well, one of the main reasons was the XP system. It was the fact that every moment I was playing that game, I was only helping myself further down the road. So it seemed like there was no wasted time.
So let me ask you, what did you think of the XP system? Because this is new. And
I was pumped. That's so I have I do the Triple Drain Pinball podcast. There's another podcast I do with two of my friends, and those friends are Tom Graff and Travis Murray. Travis Murray and Tom Graff are both top 50 players in the world. Like, they're insanely good at pinball. I am nowhere near that. So the podcast works out well because there is an interesting dynamic there. But when I look at a game, the reality is a player like Travis or a player like Tom, it doesn't matter what you do, they're going to get to the wizard mode. They're going to figure that out, and they're going to be able to do that. They're just going to be able to do that. That's just their ability. But what sucks is, I borrowed a game like Rush. I think Rush is an amazing game, but Rush kicked my butt. And I would consider Ray Day a friend. I think what Ray and Tim did with the code is exceptional. But as a player of my skill level, I felt like I could only see the first 40% of the code. So here they are designing these amazing mini wizard modes, that I'm seeing my other friends enjoy. And here I am, and I'm like, well, until you make it a challenge mode, I'm not going to see it. Right. So to me, when this XP system was introduced, I was like, I am in on that. I love that. I love the concept of that. What I am curious of, and this is something we'll all have to evaluate in whatever 6-8 months, is once these people have had these games in their home, and because of the XP system, it has allowed them to get essentially through the game, is there still that draw to come back in? And that's what I think you and Dwight have thought about with the speed run aspect of it. Yep. And the ultimate Clintar multi-ball, where that's kind of a holy cow, good luck, so I'm all in on it.
Yeah, we put a lot of time, and that was a concept that we came up with early on, that we wanted everybody to be able to get to the wizard mode eventually. Now that we're connected and everybody could do it, we had to add the feature to Insider Connected to be able to track all that stuff. So it was a company-wide thing, right, to make that happen. But that was exactly our goal. Like, you're exactly the reason why we did it, is that I can't get there either. Right?
Yeah.
I can't get to the end mode either. So I wanted to be able to, and maybe it'll take me 100 games. Maybe it'll take me 500 games. I don't know, but knowing that I'll be able to get there was enticing. And then we allowed you to get there 3 times, right, to unlock 3 different characters to keep that interesting and longer too. And whether you're at that skill level or whether you have kids in the house, right, and they may not be able to get to the wizard mode yet either, it gives everybody an incentive to be able to keep playing it, and eventually I'll get there. And all the games matter, and
yes,
that was important to us.
And I think you nailed it on that front. And one thing I told Dwight, my brother, he streams with me as well, on the Flip N Out YouTube channel, and we he's not novice, but he's not good. I don't know where, like, he likes playing pinball, but he's learning. He's getting a lot better.
Right.
And so we've streamed it now twice. So we have roughly, I don't know, 4 hours of gameplay that my brother has in this. He's only at level like 20-ish.
Okay.
But yet he still hasn't beaten a minor villain.
Right.
But the fact that is like, he wants to keep playing, and I'm excited to see him beat that minor villain, because as soon as he does that, it'll save, and then he's only a few shots away from Grindel. And it's just, and the first time the flippers are reversed on Jared and he loses that ball in Grindel. I mean, those are moments that just so many people would never experience without this type of system.
Right.
So in my opinion, I'm excited to see that, but I just think I hope this game does really well on location, because to me, it seems like it's the perfect game to always put a few games on every time you go on location, because you're going to keep working yourself up.
Right. Right. And that's definitely our hope, is that, people use it and they see where it can lead.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really know how it's going to work out in the end, right? We talked immensely about it and theorized about it and played in many different styles and had tons of people testing and stuff. But this is one of those features that really has to get out there to thousands of people before we really know where it's at, and where do we go from there. So we're watching, definitely seeing how people like it and what they do or don't like about it, because both me and Dwight are big proponents of Insider Connected and using it as ways to expand pinball and different ways of playing. And I think it does. It adds another level of depth for players. But we're also very keenly aware that the pinball's got to be fun on its own, too, even without Insider Connected. There's still got to be goals. You still have to, for those players like your friends who can get to any wizard point, right? You still have to be able to do it in a game. So we don't want to cut those people out and say, oh, you have to be Insider Connected. It's the only way to play the game. That's not really its purpose either. If you're one of those great players, the one percenters, as I would call them, then that still has to be challenging within one game. And that depth has to be there, right? You can't just get through it. And it also can't be so hard that it's daunting, right? It's like, I'll never get close. It'll take me 10,000 games and it won't matter. So finding that balance is something we're watching, and I think we're close, but whether we're perfect or not, we'll make tweaks as we go to make it feel really good for everybody.
Yeah, and I, once again, I don't envy that balance or trying to find that balance, because I think you currently have things in the game that are like kind of locked behind a certain point of progression, which is good for the XP players, because we are going to get there. We're going to chip our way, and then all of a sudden now doors are open that weren't open there before. So I know, like, some of the hero combos, that whole thing, you have to have defeated a minor villain before you can achieve those. Or even some of the bigger battles. Obviously, you have to get to a certain point of those. But those are the things where I'm one thing I haven't played the game a ton is the starting from level 1. So what is a typical game for me? What's that experience? And what I've seen so far is normally a 3-ball game, I might get to like level 15-ish. So I think if I really focus, there's a chance that I could get to Grindel in a normal game, which is like, for my skill level, I'm okay with that. I'm not expecting to be a null in a 3-ball game. Right. But the question there is, what all am I going to be able to experience in that? And I know, like, Toxic Team Up is another one that's kind of behind a few. You have to do a few things to get there. So that's what I'm curious of, is finding that balance of making a 3-ball game, a normal 3-ball game, really fun for anybody, but also giving all those fun things for the people that are in for the long haul. They're going to put in a few hours for one speed run kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a pretty daunting task, isn't
it? Yeah. But
so hopefully we came close. We'll see as it goes on. I think we did, but it's really hard to tell until we get more time out there.
For sure. And one thing I can't believe I haven't mentioned yet with Venom is the freaking fast locks. The fast locks are really awesome. They're really fun. I mean, was that a thought? Was that out of necessity because of the path changing that you needed some sort of locking, or where did that thought come to be?
It kind of evolved. Like I wanted stack blocks so that you could see the balls and that we could return them fast, right? If we were able to hold balls in there, we could get them back faster. But I don't think we had any idea of how cool that would feel until Dwight first got it going.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about it. It's like it's hard to describe to somebody, right? Until they play about the ball just continuously in motion. And you'll be making a shot and there'll be a ball kicking out of the lockdown below while it's moving into the lock up above. And there's something about that feeling of that constant flow and energy that is kind of addicting.
Yeah.
And I think it worked out amazing well. Corey, who did the core software to manage all of that, did an amazing job
Mm-hmm.
because the way it's set up, there's not discrete switches always for when a ball is somewhere to be able to do the fast kick out, but he's managed to keep track of everything and keep the game, going without losing the balls. And it's actually pretty incredible if you think about his
Yes.
amount of motion going on and all that, and it's still remembering things. But it
You
really
have
did add
to
a unique element to the game.
100%. You have to train your brain because you're you
Right,
know you're focused on one ball down below, but then you see a ball moving up top, and that's because, oh, that was the ball I hit in the scoop and it's just refilling the canister.
right,
But it's not, you're used to seeing a ball on a wire form, you're thinking that ball's about to get to my flipper. No, it's you got to be able to ignore certain areas, but then there's other things, and I've described this before, but the scoop, normally when you hit a scoop in pinball, it's to start a mode or to do something. So you hit a scoop and it's time to take a breath. Or you have a game like TNA where you hit a scoop and Scott has that design where it spits the ball back at you so fast, you got to be ready to be defensive.
right,
It's like you sink that scoop and without hesitation there's a ball at your flipper. Like
right.
it doesn't it doesn't make any sense. Like it does not make any sense, but it makes it feel not only satisfying to feel that type of thud of hitting the scoop, but also it makes it feel flowy because the ball's already there to go to the next shot.
Immediate returns. Yeah,
Yeah. So and what I'm experiencing now with the premium is there's other shots like that. The right horseshoe shot on certain characters just goes to a vuck instead of coming back at you.
yep.
So it's a similar feeling. It's really, really unique and really enjoyable from a kinetic standpoint. So mechanically, hats off to you for figuring all that out.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those games that people have to play and experience
Yeah.
too, because you really can't get that across in words as to what exactly that feels like until you play it, and then you're like,
Mhm.
oh, then you get it. It's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, this is fast and furious and fun, and to me that kind of goes along with Venom, right? He's this big giant character, and you see battles with him and stuff, and how fast he moves and it changes forms and stuff. It feels like it is Venom.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
to me, it made sense. I wanted a fast game. I wanted a game that obviously flowed really well because I kind of think of Venom as flow too with the goo and everything that um, he's formed of. So I think the mix really works well in that universe.
Oh, for sure. And the fact that you've embraced the choose your host, change the game kind of thing is you've nailed that. And I think once again I mentioned earlier, for playing the pro, I think Dwight did an exceptional job of giving you that feeling from a software standpoint, but then the premium and LE takes it a whole step further and you're genuinely giving that feeling from like a mechanical standpoint of this game is a different game
Right.
depending on who you are, which is a ton of fun. Um, Wait, my last thing that I want to mention, and I can't believe I forgot it earlier, but toppers, toppers,
Yes.
toppers weren't a thing before you started at Stern. I mean, it was, but it wasn't,
They were
right?
minor, right? They're usually
Yeah,
plastics and lights, and they weren't as big of a deal. But
yeah,
people really seem to like toppers, and to me, it's another cool thing to design. So I love them too. Right?
sure.
So I
And
try to do something interesting up there. So if you put something up there, right, it is something to look at and
mhm.
something unique that adds to the game. And I think on Mando, we really stepped that up a few notches. And not only visually is it really cool to look at, but it also adds more things to the game too.
Mhm.
So we had to think of new things to add when we did the topper to
Yeah,
give
I
people
know.
something more, when they buy it.
Well, Stranger Things, you had essentially the infinity mirror, which is
Yep,
a really unique look. That's another thing.
yep,
If
stands
once again,
out.
if people are getting a remade or a vault Stranger Things, do yourself a favor and go ahead and grab a topper while you can. It really
The UV
just
kit. Yeah.
yeah, it really adds to the overall experience of that game. But Mando, yeah, Mando is a whole nother level, putting a screen up there, giving that holographic effect. Just quite a unique experience, and it looks awesome. It genuinely looks awesome. I know Zach has one on his, so I've witnessed that. And Dwight, he made a comment in chat that the goal for Venom is apparently to go one step further, or to you want to top the Mando topper. Um,
That's
I
a
don't know.
tall order.
It is a tall
That's a
order,
tall
but
order. I'm not sure we'll top it, but yeah, we have some interesting things planned.
awesome.
Just say
It's just the topper's just gonna ooze goo down on the machine depending on who you pick. I don't know. I don't know what you're gonna do, but I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see what that is. But yeah, that was kind of all in one, history. Just we rolled through a lot over the last almost hour, and yeah, I really appreciate your time. I don't know, is there anything else that you want to mention, or I mean, you've spent a few years now at Stern, different than the old days. I mean, overall views on pinball now versus then. I don't know. Any other general thoughts that you have?
Yeah, pinball. I've been asked that a few times because it is, well, the game itself, the physical game itself, isn't that much different, right? I think we have some new technology, and we can employ some more toys in different ways, and we have the full display now in full color. But the core of the game is still there. It's still the
Hmm.
same, which is awesome, right? That it maintained all that. But one of the biggest things I think that's really changed is just social media and how it's connected the pinball universe. Like back in the 90s, there was Pinball Expo, and that's about it
Okay.
at the time as far as shows and bringing pinball people together. But now there's a show almost every weekend across the United States, somewhere that you could go to. The fact that pinball has connected so many people is just awesome. I think that helps it grow. Friends bring in their friends, and it's a social thing along with a competitive thing to yourself and with your friends. And it's a unique experience, and what I like to do is, like, we talked a lot about trying to make the games more accessible to those new players. And to me, there's a lot more players out there who don't play than do play. So I want to get all those people playing
Yeah, yeah.
pinball, right, and having fun, because we know how much fun it is. And so anything that we can do that can kind of draw more players in, I'm for.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and I will tell you, from experience, if you happen to see any of Brian's games on location, give them a shot. They're a ton of fun, especially Venom. This is a game I've been streaming it, but I'm trying my best to communicate what the game is, and it's a challenge just because of how unique it feels, and that's something. Same thing with Stranger Things. There's people that stream Stranger Things, and the UV light kit will never come over the right way on stream or the projection. You've really got to experience that in person. So do yourself a favor, reach out to your local distributor. Flip N Out's obviously a great one to reach out to, and hopefully you guys can get on a list to buy a Stranger Things or buy a Venom, because they're just fun. They're very, very fun games. So
Yeah, I'm
um,
super excited. Stranger Things is coming back too. That
yeah,
because it's one of the games that we haven't vaulted, and it's been a few years. So it's the one I'm probably asked the most about. Are they going to make more? Are they going to make more? So
yeah,
this
yeah.
will finally say they're going to make some more. So that's
Well, I'm hoping, I hope more locations grab them, because then it gives me more of a chance to play them. And
awesome.
I don't know, depending, I think Zach's already sold out of his allotment, so I don't know if I'm going to have a chance to stream one again, because I'd love to. I'd absolutely love to. But well, yeah, thank you so much, Ryan, for being on here. Keep doing what you're doing at Stern. I'm really enjoying it. I'm excited to see what's coming out next for you. Obviously, with I know the topper hasn't been revealed, or accessories for Venom haven't been revealed, and then just code. I know as of today, Dwight just released yesterday 0.92, so I'm excited to
Right.
see what else is coming with Venom, so we can play through that. But yeah, all I can really say is thank you. Thank you so much for being on here and doing this.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks for having me, Joel. I love talking. I'll talk about pinball forever if if you keep me on. So
Perfect.
anytime.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, if anybody's watching this on YouTube, well, you would be. If you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to thumbs up, comment, like anything like that. Any question you think I should ask Brian that I didn't, whatever. I try to read all the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more interviews. But yeah, once again, Brian, thanks again. And are you going to be at Pinball Expo?
I will be at Expo.
Perfect. Well, if you see him, say hi. and I look forward to seeing you there as
I
well.
believe we're doing a making of talk of Venom too, so come to that.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So yeah, if there's a question I didn't ask Brian in this interview,
Right.
ask him there. It'll
Exactly.
be perfect.
Yep. We love questions.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you very much. And yeah, we will talk again soon.
All right, great.
All right.
See you, Joe. Thanks.
Bye.